PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds has gone from a game with significant influence on internet culture and being known as the inspiration for many of today's most popular games to a game which has ended up copying its very own copycats and going on to be disliked by many of its original 2018 fanbase. The story of PUBG starts when this guy, Brendan Green, who you probably know as PlayerUnknown, decided in 2011 that he wanted to move from Ireland to Brazil. The reason being very simple. He wanted a Brazilian baddie. Green would end up finding love in Brazil, but more importantly, it was during his time in Brazil that he stumbled across a Japanese movie called Battle Royale. Battle Royale is a movie set in a dystopian Japanese future where every year the government sends 42 students to an island where they are forced to compete with randomized weapons in an ever-shrinking safe zone. And upon watching the movie in 2011, Brendan did nothing. He actually did nothing for a few more years, but it was when he got divorced in 2013 and was now unemployed and bored all day, and worst of all, living on government support back in Ireland, he started remembering the movie that he watched and began making mods based off of it. Between 2013 and 2014, Brendan worked on Arma 2 and 3 mods, in which he brought all of the aspects of the movie to the game. Making the Arma mods would be a great learning experience, but there was still one major problem. He was still living on government support. Luckily, because of how popular his Arma mods had become, Sony would recruit him for their upcoming game, H1Z1 King of the Hill. Specifically, they hired him to be a consultant for the Battle Royale game mode within H1Z1, as he was the most experienced coder in the Battle Royale sphere. This consultant job was a part-time job, so though it did bring in some money, it wasn't quite enough to get off government support. Which is why in 2016, when he was approached by a South Korean video game company, Bluehole, which was wondering if he wanted to make a standalone game for them, he instantly agreed. And that's when the PUBG Corporation was founded. Now the interesting thing about the name PUBG is that originally they were actually going to name it PUBR, which would have stood for PlayerUnknown's Battle Royale. But PUBR just didn't have the same ring to it obviously as PUBG, which is why they changed it to Battlegrounds. Upon founding the PUBG Corporation, Green would immediately move to South Korea and begin working long hours as they had to get this game out fast, since by this point a lot of developers knew that if they were the first to create a standalone Battle Royale, they'd become insanely rich. And so to the drawing board they went. The first idea for the game was that there'd be 1,000 players who would be dropped off on an island, each one getting effectively randomized weapons while staying in a constantly shrinking zone, just like the movie. But the problem was, due to hardware restrictions, server sizes couldn't reach 1,000 players. And if they had, PUBG would have been a completely different game, with it being 10 times as fast-paced and with the whole server basically being as crowded as the school. After realizing they'd basically be restricted to 100-player servers, they decided to start development with a tight focus on competitiveness and skill. And after roughly a year of development, Early Access was released on March 23rd, 2017. And after that whole year, this is what they had to show for. I'm obviously kidding, it wasn't all glitches, and the game itself was actually a major leap forward for the gaming industry, as they had succeeded in having PUBG be the first Battle Royale game. Prior to this, if you wanted to play a Battle Royale game, your only options consisted of mods or game modes, as seen in Minecraft with the Hunger Games game mode, which was featured on many of the biggest servers, for example. Besides the novelty of being the first Battle Royale game, it was also just a genuinely good game. The layout was good, and the graphics were also, good. On top of that, the glitches actually helped promote the game, as the streamers would play the game, see a glitch, make a scene, causing viewers to play it, make their own videos on it, and you understand, it created a snowball effect. A snowball effect so large, in fact, that just a few months after Early Access launched, the game had sold over 4 million copies, which at $20 each meant that from the $600,000 they invested, just by late summer they had made over $56 million. Just a few months after the Early Access launch, the game also reached 1 million concurrent players, and had rapidly become one of Steam's most played games, even breaking Steam's concurrent players record of 1.3 million people playing one game at the same exact time. Since the game was growing so quickly, Bluehole decided to start regularly updating the game. The first changes were generic ones like fixing bugs, improving performance, and balancing gameplay, but this was also when key features began being added to the game, such as vaulting and climbing, which made the game more fun. Weather effects like fog and rain were also added, which added a layer of unpredictability, as well as drawing you more into the game and making it more personal. if that makes sense. It was also during this time that PUBG had become a cultural phenomenon and was being played by many of the world's most recognizable content creators such as PewDiePie, Dr. Disrespect, Shroud, and of course, Ninja. This may seem strange to those that only know him from Fortnite, but it was actually during his PUBG days that he really started making a name for himself and started getting popular. The interesting thing about Ninja is that he actually started playing Battle Royale games ever since H1Z1, and I'm 94% sure that you have seen a clip of Ninja playing H1Z1, such as this one.
The fuck you say to me, you little shit?
Now, all of these things mentioned thus far have only happened during the early access era of PUBG, which of course brings us to December 21st, 2017, the official release date. Then just 10 days later, we were brought into 2018, the biggest ever year of PUBG. First of all, in March of 2018, PUBG Mobile was released. This was part of a larger push to expand into Asian markets, and it was the first time that PUBG became free, with it quickly getting hundreds of millions of downloads as a result, especially in markets such as India, which got such a huge fan base that there's literally an I guess video made specifically on Indian PUBG Mobile. Now, I won't be covering PUBG Mobile in this video since it would need a whole video of its own, and including in this one would make this video like 40 minutes long and super all over the place. So if this video does well, I'll make one on PUBG Mobile. It was then in January that Miramir, and I probably mispronounced that horribly, entered full rotation in January of 2018. It featured an arid Latin American style desert with some pretty major cities which I won't even try pronouncing. The good thing about this map is that it wasn't just a reskin of the old one, it actually had a lot of unique features that the old one didn't have, which is just great. It was also in January of 2018 that PUBG reached the highest concurrent player count of any game on Steam ever, getting 3,257,000 players all playing at Steam at the same exact time. The reason PUBG reached its peak player count in January of 2018 rather than any other time of the year is for a few reasons. Firstly is obviously because for the past half a year leading up to this point, it's basically all streamers would play, and by this point just enough time had passed that everyone that had heard about the game had had enough time to actually buy the game and start playing. And any old players that left the game in November of 2017, for example, because of the previously mentioned new map release of Miramir. Another very big thing to consider is that though Fortnite was released by this point, it hadn't had enough time to actually become big enough to be a full-on equal competitor to PUBG, meaning that it was only barely affecting PUBG's player count. And lastly, PUBG Mobile hadn't been released yet, meaning that anyone who wanted to play PUBG could only play it on Steam. Throughout 2018, PUBG continued developing, with Sandhawk being released in June of 2018, which was a jungle map. From March to April, event modes were launched like 8-man squads, and an event pass system is released after Fortnite popularized it. This was also the first instance of PUBG ever taking inspiration from the game which copied it, Fortnite. Now, I mentioned earlier that PUBG had reached the absolute peak player count of any game on Steam ever, and this may seem like a very good thing, and obviously it was, but when you reach a peak, it means that everything from that point forward is only downhill. That's why 2019 was the first year PUBG's player count entered into a significant decline, as competition from Fortnite and Apex Legends was really picking up by that point. The reason people would even choose to play Fortnite or Apex instead of PUBG was usually for one of two reasons. Either people preferred to play the lighter, quicker rounds that Fortnite and Apex had to offer, or they were simply unwilling to pay the extra $20. So the solution was very, very simple. They couldn't compete on the actual playstyle, because if PUBG had become light and quick like Fortnite, they wouldn't actually have anything unique going for them, and all of their fans would leave immediately for Fortnite because PUBG would just become the cheaper copy. For that reason, Bluehole decided to publish PUBG Lite. PUBG Lite was the same as normal PUBG, except it was simpler, could be run on a weaker computer, and was most importantly free. This ended up in PUBG Lite receiving a temporary large increase in players, especially from poorer countries like India. As for PUBG proper, in 2020, the Karakin map was released, which included explosive walls and the Black Zone. In 2020, there was also a certain minor worldwide event which took place, which caused the player count to remain at around 250,000 rather than falling all the way down to something like 80,000, meaning that there was a good chance that the virus was actually the saving grace for PUBG. In 2021, the map Tego was added, and a PUBG universe expansion was made, which was the beginning of some real lore building, which the fanbase did seem to enjoy. But the most important thing which happened in 2021 was PUBG Lite was discontinued for seemingly no reason. But in 2022, it all made sense once PUBG proper went free to play, resulting in a huge player spike. The spike was actually so huge that prior to the free to play release, it was at 146,000 players, but afterwards it was at over 690,000 concurrent players. Then moving forward to 2023, PUBG maintained a player count of 200,000 players, mostly because of the free to play option. And then in 2024, player counts started to slowly rise again, mainly due to free to play refinements and some certain events. Entering 2025, some new game modes were launched, and most importantly, AI teammates were integrated, called the PUBG Ally. The PUBG Ally was even capable of real-time strategic decision making and even loot sharing, which was a first for any shooter game. In January of this year, it seemed like it would be another average year for PUBG, but then out of nowhere, on a random day in March, PUBG's player count jumped all the way to 1.3 million concurrent players, the highest in over 7 years since the last time this was even reached was in late 2018. In April, the game is still going strong and a good daily average of 350,000 concurrent players. And with how smart and strategic Bluehole has been with their decisions, such as going free to play at just the right moment, it seems like only a matter of time until PUBG starts averaging 500,000 players again. But I don't know, what do you think? If you want me to make a video on PUBG Mobile or literally any other game in the world, do tell me in the comments, as I do need some engagement for my videos to actually start rising a little. But yeah, see ya.